Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Americas. Here's a look at today's show. The death toll from the volcanic eruption in Guatemala continues to climb as rescuers desperately dig through roads and villages covered in ash. Then, as anti-government protests continue in Nicaragua, we'll look at the plight of indigenous people there who are hoping to use the movement to keep settlers from occupying their land. And ahead of the G7 summit in Canada, authorities are preparing a new system capable of handling any potential riots or attacks. I'm Jeannie Gladula. Guatemala was hit by disaster this week as the Fuego Volcano erupted, then erupted again. Since then, the death toll has continued to rise. Guatemala's disaster agency says up to 2 million people have been affected by the eruption.
In San Miguel Los Lotes, destruction paves the streets. Rescue efforts are still underway, but locals are losing hope of finding their missing relatives alive.
We came to help with the search for people because one is my daughter who hasn't turned up. So we came to see if we could rescue her, or at least find her body, so that she can be with us.
The village is about 35 kilometers southwest of Guatemala City and on the skirts of the Fuego Volcano, which erupted on Sunday. It was one of the hardest hit areas. The eruption sent columns of rocks and smoke up to 10 kilometers into the sky, dusting several regions with ash. More than 3,200 people were evacuated.
As of now, we believe that there could be up to 100 people still in the impacted area. However, there's a lot of volcanic material that's impeding our work.
Rains are expected to continue and complicate searches in the coming days. And many who have lost everything in the disaster are turning to the government for assistance.
We don't have anywhere to stay. We've lost everything, our land, our home, all our things. We're hoping that the government will have compassion for us all because many of us have lost our entire families.
On Monday, Guatemala's President Jimmy Morales visited the sites of the disaster. He declared a state of emergency and promised the release of government funds to help reconstruction. El Fuego is one of several active volcanoes out of 34 in the Central American country of Guatemala.
Next now to what has been described as a human tragedy in Nicaragua. The main rights group there says at least 120 people have been killed since anti-government protests broke out 7 weeks ago. And at the heart of the protests are Nicaragua's indigenous populations. Those tribes are rebelling against settlers who are using force to keep them away from their land. For the natives, the weeks of anti-government protests are an opportunity to push for more reform to get back their land. Here's a report from our correspondent.
They've come from every corner of the country, by boat and by road. Nicaragua's indigenous people are at the heart of demonstrations that have engulfed the country for over a month.
The natives have suffered too many massacres, all organized by Daniel Ortega. He sent colonizers to steal our land. That is not acceptable.
Since Daniel Ortega came to power, the 22 native communities across Nicaragua have seen their territories forcibly reduced by 40%. In these UNESCO-protected mountains, 30,000 people are fighting to keep their land. Benito was evicted in 2013.
From this post to that tree over there, this is our land. This belongs to our ancestors, to my dad's family and my grandfather's. That's why we're fighting. It's always belonged to us.
Like 36 other families, Benito lost his property to those he calls the colonizers, companies he accuses of illegal deforestation. The communities point the finger at Ortega, saying he allows his close allies access to exploit the forest's timber. Benito and his friends are involved in a lawsuit.
I want them to give me back my land. It goes from here to there.
Humberto, the community's president, is representing them in courts.
What I know for sure is that the justice is biased, and the national police as well. They both favor the colonizer, that's obvious. This is the original propriety title of the native Jinotega community since 1723. It proves we are the only owners of this land.
Twice they have won the trial, but the indigenous people are still living here with no field to grow their crops. Benito has no income.
This is what we're eating every day, only beans and tortillas. Since they kicked us out of our property, we don't have anything to sell, so we can't buy any food to eat properly.
To get back to their land, the communities here join a growing national movement in calling on Ortega to stand down.
Let's take a look now at what Donald Trump has been up to this week in the United States. The president isn't much for giving apologies, but he has become a big fan of granting pardons. In a tweet this week, Trump said that he could even pardon himself, though he hastened to add that he had, quote, done nothing wrong. Now, technically, he is right, but there is one notable exception to a president's pardoning powers Trump doesn't mention: cases of impeachment. Under the U.S. system of checks and balances, Congress can hold presidents accountable by ousting them using impeachment trials. The controversy over U.S. football players taking a knee during the national anthem bumped up to the White House this week. Donald Trump decided to cancel a celebration for Super Bowl champs, the Philadelphia Eagles, after it became clear most of the players weren't going to show up. Instead, Trump hosted what he called a celebration of America. To make matters worse for Trump, participants in the 2018 basketball finals at the NBA made it clear their champions wouldn't be going to the White House either. And a phone call between Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron went sour last week after the French president reportedly criticized Trump's policies, calling them illegal and a mistake. The call came the same day the U.S. announced a unilateral decision to slap steel and aluminum tariffs on American allies, including Mexico, Canada, and the European Union. A source said the talk between the two leaders was just terrible, as, quote, Trump can't handle criticism. Well, that call came ahead of the G7 summit in Quebec, and that brings me to our number of the week. It's this one, 605 million Canadian dollars. Now, that is the estimated cost of that summit that kicks off this weekend. Meanwhile, those opposed to the G7 summit want to make sure their voices are heard and are already preparing protests. Local authorities, expecting thousands of protesters and a potential security risk, are preparing a new system capable of handling any potential riots or attacks. Joël Pouliot reports.
Anti-G7 activists are meeting behind this door of a social center in Montreal, but our camera is not allowed in. A coordinator for the organization has accepted to explain why from outside the building.
During past summit protests, images taken from the meetings were used to arrest people. So people who come here and participate in these assemblies prefer not to be filmed to avoid this type of problem.
The anti-G7 network wants to remain anonymous, but is still looking to recruit for what it calls the fight against the Group of Seven's neoliberal economic imperialism. 400 kilometers from there is the tourist town that will be hosting the heads of state, La Malbaie, population 8,000.
What is essential for a G7 meeting? Money, fences, police officers.
For this local association, the promise of economic benefits from the summit are an attempt to conceal the actual cost of planning it.
We're protesting the astronomical costs of this G7. We're talking about 600 million. Money that should be reinvested in our public services and in our social programs that were incredibly compromised in the past few years, especially in Quebec with its austerity policies.
For security purposes, fences and cameras are already in place around the Manoir Richelieu. authorities are preparing for proximity with the local population while planning strict supervision of summit opposition protests.
It's part of security measures. We don't disclose the exact number of police officers that will be working here, but we can say there will be thousands. We are well prepared if there are riots. We are ready for them.
Any legal protest during the summit in La Malbaie will have to take place in a designated parking lot, 100 meters long and 80 meters wide. Remaining events will take place 140 kilometers to the south in Quebec City.
Well, that's all the time we have for this Inside the Americas. We'll see you again next week for all the news from north to south.
Across Africa, presented by Georgia Calvin-Smith.
From North to South Africa, from Bamako to Nairobi, from Accra to Mogadishu. Bringing you all the political, economic, cultural and social news from Africa for a better insight into an ever-changing continent.
Across Africa on France 24 and France24.com.
Wadood is an Afghan dreamer. Every morning when he rises in Kabul, it's to his ideal, a day of trials spent convicting war criminals. But every moment he spends gathering witness statements, he's putting his life at risk. The Taliban have let him know that he's on their blacklist. But not even his wife, the love of his life, could stop his pursuit of justice.
Reporters, presented by Mark Owen on France 24 and France24.com.